Okay, welcome everyone to the CELPIP Get the Facts webinar. I see a lot of people already been using the questions box and have let me know where they're logging in and everything. So that's great. It seems like the audio is working and everyone can see the screen. Okay, so we're going to get started now. I just want to go through a few administrative things first before we get into the session itself. You'll notice that the microphones are muted, and that's because we do have quite a few attendees here for webinars, and here we have a good more than 50 people actually here. So it will be impossible to get the microphones working. So we do mute them for these sessions, but we do communicate through the questions box. And you can find that, as many people already have, on the GoToWebinar control panel. So if that minimizes on you, sometimes during the session it will get small. You can open it back up again by clicking on an orange arrow, and that will bring up the box, and then you can find the questions box down below. Okay. If you type anything in there, only myself or Cameron, who is also with us today, can see it. No one else in the session is able to see it, what you type in there, which is not, maybe a good and bad thing there, but unfortunately we're not able to change that. That's the way GoToWebinar works. So, but we can see what you type in there, and that's a great way of us keeping in touch with you throughout the session. You might have a question. Great. Type it in the questions box, and either myself or Cameron will try to address the question as best we can. But also sometimes I have some questions during the session, and it's a great way to let me know you're engaged. And I like, obviously reading what you have to say as well, any comments you have. So feel free to use that questions box anytime you like throughout the session, okay? If you do have any technical issues, hopefully not, it's best to try to log out and log back in, because most of the time it is on your end, and logging out and logging back in usually fixes that. If not, it's best to try Chrome as your browser. Okay, so that just seems to work best with GoToWebinar, Chrome for some reason. If you're not using that, try that. However, do let us know in the questions box if you're having any problems hearing anything. I can see Gorilivana is having some trouble. Hopefully no one else is having any trouble hearing anything. Usually, again, it's on your end. There's some kind of problem and you need to address it. But do let us know in the questions box and we'll try to help. Sometimes it's at our end, but not usually. It's nice, of course, to have a paper and pen handy today. However, I will remind you that you can view this webinar later if you like. It will be available to you by a link that's provided in an email afterwards. Okay, also you can use the same link that you used to register for this session to review the session afterwards as well. Okay, and I will also let you know if there's any slide that you really want to review immediately, you can use a camera icon at the top of your screen to take a screenshot. So you'll see a little camera at the top of the screen, and that enables you to take a screenshot of something that you want. Just save it on your desktop or something like that. Okay, and finally, as I mentioned, you'll get an email after this session, about an hour after, and it has a link to a survey as well. We really appreciate if you can complete the survey. It only takes about 3 minutes or so to do the survey. All right, let's get started. So this is a path to success. So a lot of you may be already at the end of this. And, as I noticed, I noticed some people are having a test maybe tomorrow or very soon, maybe in a week or so. So there's not a lot of time to prepare. But some of you who are preparing maybe a month or 2 or 3 in advance have an opportunity to take advantage of some of the programs that we have and some of the services. We have a lot of test preparation materials that you might be interested in, okay? So this is the first, here you can see you are here. On the left here, that's the CELPIP Get the Facts seminar. But I wanted to let you know we have a lot of additional seminars as well. Okay, so definitely You want to take advantage of all the webinars that we have, and definitely go to our website and see if there are any webinars that are of interest to you. We have speaking webinars that focus in on speaking and also writing. Unfortunately, we don't have reading and listening at the present moment for webinars, but we're going to be working on that in the future as well. Okay, and I see Melissa says she doesn't see the camera. Now, this camera icon is not on your phone, it's on the screen, on the GoToWebinar screen that you're looking at. It's at the top and there's a little camera icon. That just enables you, if you click it, to take a screenshot of a slide if you're interested in reviewing it right after the session. Okay, and Melissa has a test tomorrow as well. So seems quite a few might have a test tomorrow. So we'll get through a good review here today. But I just want to go through this path a little bit more. If you do have a little bit more time, you want to take the sample test if you haven't done that. That's a free sample test online. And you just want to do that to make sure you're familiar with the format of the test and get a sense of the kinds of questions you're going to be asked. And that's really helpful. You can do the sample test as many times as you like as well. But we have many additional tests that you can purchase as well, practice tests as well. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about those at the end of the session. But then if you have time, CELPIP prep materials are available for you, and I'll talk about those later. So they involve self-study, most of them, and many of them are now online. So they're very useful, and I'll talk about those at the end of the session. And then of course you have your test day. And many, like Adinesh, has a test tomorrow. Bilal has a test this Saturday. Melissa, again, is, I think, tomorrow, right? And Mana as well. You have a test tomorrow. And you're wondering if we have a spell check for the writing part. Unfortunately, no, Mana. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay. And Gurlivana, no, you can't see anyone talk. You won't be able to see anyone during this session. Although here, I'll show you myself now. We don't use the camera because, again, that causes a little bit of an issue, blocking the screen and also some internet lag issues. But this is me. My name's John Haggerty. I'm a content developer, online instructor here at Paragon. And this is just some background about me. I do have about 20 years of experience and 10 years in South Korea, actually a lot of that doing test preparation. So I do have a good understanding of some of the challenges you face in preparing for tests. So I'm just going to do my best here today and in all the webinars that I deliver to try to help you understand the test, maybe prepare, think of some strategies, and just feel more comfortable taking a test, which is never a comfortable experience for most people. All right, so this is just a basic agenda. We're going to talk about the CELPIP basics. I'm not going to spend too much time on why you should choose CELPIP because maybe a lot of you already have done that. But let's spend more time on test information, and then we'll end with some test preparation materials. And throughout the session, we'll talk about key strategies as well. And I also love to hear about your own strategies, that you try to use during the test as well. I don't think there are any, perfect strategies that work for everyone, but it's really helpful to experiment with strategies. All right, so just if you didn't know what the CELPIP stands for, it's kind of hard to remember. The Canadian English Language Proficiency Index Program. Okay, so that's what it does stand for, but not important to remember that. But certainly it's important to know that it's a general language proficiency test. Okay, and that means, it's testing your ability to use English in a variety of everyday situations. And so it is a computer delivered test. So that means you will be doing all components, speaking, reading, listening, writing, all on the computer. Unlike other tests that may do speaking in person, the CELPIP does it on the computer, right? Okay, and it does focus again on functional language proficiency. That's daily English. It's not academic or business English. It's originally developed at UBC, where I actually did my PhD. And it's administered by Paragon Testing Enterprises. And this is a subsidiary of UBC. Okay. And very importantly, it's recognized and designated by the IRCC as evidence of English language proficiency. So most are taking it for that reason, although there are other reasons to take the test. And some people may be taking it for other reasons. But that's the primary reason for immigration purposes, and that can be for citizenship or permanent residency. So we do have two versions of the test. Okay, the general test, the cost in Canada is $280. You do all 4 of the sections of that test: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. It's about 3 hours, and that's basically the same test is the CELPIP General LS test. However, it only assesses listening and speaking, and that's what the LS stands for. Okay, and of course the cost is less because of that. It's about 1 hour, and it's only assessing listening and speaking. So why do we have 2 different tests? Well, because some people don't need to take or don't need to prove proficiency in all 4 components: speaking, reading, listening, and writing. And that's something that the Canadian government has decided on. The CELPIP General, you should know, is for permanent residency. So if you are aiming for that, you want to be sure you're taking the CELPIP General. However, if you're interested in Canadian citizenship, we have a separate test that only assesses listening and speaking. That's good because, you know, other tests like the IELTS doesn't do that. You'll need to take all components even if you don't need them. So just keep that in mind, and also be aware of which test you need to take for your purposes, so you're not doing something that you don't necessarily need to do, right? All right, and also I just want to quickly mention, if you do have questions, often you can find the answers quickly online. So it's often a good place to go and check first. Check your frequently asked questions, okay? And on the website, celpip.ca, and here's where you would find it. It's in the very first drop-down menu at the bottom, okay? And that's where you'll find, probably most of the time, you'll find an answer to some of your questions, but not always. So you'll have to find other ways of finding the answer, and I'll show you how you can contact us at the end. So why should you choose CELPIP? Well, it uses Canadian accents in the listening passage, which is good. That means you won't have to listen to British accents or Australian accents or anything like that. You can rely on a consistent accent throughout the test when you're listening. And that applies to the questions as well, whenever a question is being spoken, like on the listening test. And as I mentioned, it's general proficiency, not academic English or business English. Although, you know, you do want to improve your language and you want to show your language ability, but you don't have to speak in a very, you know, academic way on this test. We have a lot of test centers in Canada, and we're continuing to expand throughout the world. So, you know, we do have people logging in here from Dubai, I know, and from the Philippines. So it's good to know that there are test centers close by, and we're continuing to improve and expand throughout the world to make sure test centers are available where people are living, okay? And of course, I do want to mention, if you do want to register for the test, I know a lot of you already have, but if you have not and you decide to take the test, it's easy to register right online at celpip.ca. Okay, you can find your test center that's close to you right through the website. Once you find a test center that's close to you, then it's very easy to register. You can see whether the test is available, and you can register right online, which is nice. Now, when you see a test center, hopefully it's nicely designed like this one. This is our test center here in Vancouver. Okay, and it's got privacy shields, as you can see, and the headsets are quite good. So they do block out, I wouldn't say 100% of the noise, but a good amount of the noise. Remember, when you're doing a speaking test in a computer test on a computer in a test center, you're going to deal with noise around you. And so it's good to be practicing that to not get distracted by others around you. The headsets help, but they're not, going to cancel all the noise around you. Thankfully, test centers also provide earplugs. So if you're not listening to anything, you can put the earplugs in, and sometimes that will help you focus, especially if other people have started the speaking component of the test, but you're not there yet. That can happen and can interrupt you while you're maybe doing another section of the test. So the test centers do have earplugs, so you want to make sure you ask for those if you think they'll be helpful to you during the test. Okay, you'll get the results of your CELPIP in 5 calendar days, which is great. That's not 5 business days, that's 5 calendar days, which is great. So fast turnaround in terms of the results, and I think that's important. Your score report will look something like this, and you'll get a breakdown in listening, reading, writing, and speaking, and also an overall score, which is an average of all of those components, those 4 skills there. They're all equally weighted on the test. Now remember, you may have requirements for an overall score on the CELPIP, but you may also have individual requirements for the skills, listening, reading, writing, and speaking. So you want to make sure you know what you need to get what you're aiming for. Okay, and these are the CELPIP levels. You'll notice we go from 0 to 12. Okay, and a lot of people are looking for maybe a 9 or a 7, or maybe a 5. These seem to be popular targets for people. They are aligned with the CLB level here, you can see on the right. And the CLB is the Canadian Language Benchmarks. And that's a separate system for basically measuring what people are able to do in a real communicative context. Okay, and so we generally align with those CLB levels. So it's kind of good to know where you're at, most likely in CLBs as well. So whatever you get on the CELPIP will correspond somewhat to the CLB level as well. And if you want to know more about CLB levels, you may want to look into that. There's a website called language.ca if you're interested. And of course, the CELPIP is in one test sitting. Okay, so you don't have to go do a speaking portion on a separate time or a separate day. You're able to do the CELPIP all in one sitting, and I think that's important as well. So one sitting. Again, reading, the text and questions are on the same screen, so it's a benefit of doing it on the computer. In speaking, now this maybe some people do prefer to do an interview. Personally, I prefer to do it on a computer. Even though it feels a little unnatural maybe at first, it's something I can practice and get better at. It's kind of hard to find people to practice interviews with, I find. So it's kind of nice to be able to practice this and get better at it, and I can do that on my own as well. So you will be doing your speaking component on a computer, and you won't have to worry about, making eye contact or body language and things like this. So, or maybe a mean interviewer. That's possible. Also, writing. We did have the question earlier about spell check. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of a different test. My apologies. We have another test here called the CALE, which is an academic English language test. And that test does not have a spell check. I'm happy to report that the CELPIP does have a spell check. So, anything that's, probably misspelled will be underlined in red, just as it would be in Word. However, it's not perfect because maybe you typed another word that's actually a word, but it's the wrong word. So sometimes it doesn't always catch anything that you misspell, but it's good to have just to catch the obvious spelling mistakes that you make. It also has a word count and other editing tools, and I'll show you a screen later as well. Also, because it's on the computer, you will have a headset, and you'll also have volume control, which is nice. So you can set the volume to what works for you, okay? Some people want to listen a little bit louder maybe to avoid being distracted. And overall, of course, you have timers. So important to have timers just to know where you are and how much time you have left on any particular task that you're doing. So I think that's one of the real benefits of doing it on the computer as well, is you always know how much time you have. All right, let's get right into the features and format of the test and talk about strategies and skills. Now, we don't have time to go into depth for each of the sections, but I want to, overview, kind of talk a little bit about the strategies involved, and then that will help you, I guess, think about how you can start to prepare. If you have a test coming up, you won't be able to do too much, but certainly this will be a good overview for you, just to kind of get ready for the big day. So there are 4 sections for the general test. As I mentioned, that test is usually for permanent residency. It has all 4 sections, 4 skills being assessed there, and it tells you roughly the amount of time. So you start with listening. You'll do that for under an hour, and then reading just under an hour again, and then you'll move on to writing and speaking. Okay, so writing again takes about an hour, and then you'll finish up with speaking in about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, in the general LS, you'll only have the 2 sections to complete, listening and speaking, so it'll be a much shorter test, about an hour and 10 minutes. Okay, let's look at the listening section. Okay, and your questions are great. Thank you, Ronaldo and Mana, and thanks, Cameron, for answering. I'm going to address Mana's question later when we're looking at writing. It's a very good question, but I'll just continue on for now. But thanks, Cameron, for answering. So in listening, you start with this. The important thing to remember here is that you only get to listen once. That's a little stressful, right? We don't get a second listen to verify anything. We have to be ready. As we're listening, we're answering questions. After you listen, you'll get the questions. You won't know the question before the listening or while you're listening. You have to wait till afterwards. And that's why note-taking can be very, very important here, because you're not looking at questions while you're answering. Other tests might do that. You're actually waiting. You're just focused on the listening here, and then the questions will come later. So therefore, note-taking is so helpful. Remember, paper and pen are provided by the test center. You don't need to bring it. You'll get as much paper as you need. Very important to work on note-taking skills during the listening section. The timers help you manage, obviously, your time. And the passages and questions tend to get harder. So it starts a little easier and then progressively gets a little bit more difficult. You'll have to listen to a longer listening passage, maybe about like a news report or kind of an academic person speaking. So it gets a little more challenging. But remember that everything's equally weighted. So, even if you don't do well, you don't feel like you're doing well at the end of the section, you may have done really well up to that point, and you can still get a very good score, okay? Now, the audio passage plays once before the questions come, okay? So make sure you're listening carefully and taking notes. And what you take notes on is really important, okay? And Bilal's asked, how many minutes per task is there in the listening section? And it's hard to specify that because the timing changes, but generally about 30 seconds per question. But the timing, you just have to pay attention to it. About some of the tasks, this changes, okay? So, but your timer will always be here up at the top right side. Okay, and always pay attention to that to know how much time you have left, okay? Because if you miss a miss it and the time runs out, it will automatically move forward and you won't be able to answer the question. So one strategy that some people use that I think is helpful is make sure you answer the question and then continue. Once you have maybe a pretty good idea, you're not 100%, maybe it's early in your time, just select it before the time runs out, and then continue to think about it until your time runs out, and then you can always make a change. I just think it's terrible to have missed the question because the time ran out. If you do finish early, though, you can click this next button. Okay, maybe you're satisfied with your answer and you really want to move forward, and you can do that. Just remember, you can't go back. Okay, you have to be sure that you're ready. Okay, and also you don't save any of that time. Like, you can't use that time for another question. So really, there's no reason to use the next button other than you just don't want to look at the screen anymore, right? And Rowena, you've asked, do we need to click next even if the time is finished? No. That's a good question. I always wonder about that myself, but no, if the time runs out, you will automatically move forward. So really, there's no real need to click the next button at all, but it is there for you if you just don't want to look at the screen and want to move forward. Okay, and there are two types of listening questions, basic types of listening tasks. So questions, or parts 1 to 3, the questions appear on the screen one at a time. Okay, so you go through each question one at a time. But you notice this parts 4 to 6, it changes. And you have 5 questions here, for example, on the same screen. So your timer changes as well. So roughly, you could figure out your total time is probably about 30 seconds each, but really on the longer task, each question, some might take you a little bit longer to answer, and some might be a little bit easier. So the time you spend on that question for parts 4 to 6, it's up to you, right? You have your overall time to complete that task, and you just have to make sure you answer all the questions before your time runs out. Okay, so I hope that's clear. I just wanted to show you a little example. You'll get a lot of visuals throughout the CELPIP listening and speaking. You get visuals, which is helpful. Especially in speaking, you'll see a lot more visuals, but you'll get visuals, including pictures or video even, during the listening test, if you haven't tried it out yet. Okay. Gagandeep has asked, is the 30-second include question reading? Well, yes. In the questions where you have to read the questions, yes. However, in early questions in the listening test, it's actually spoken. So you won't see, and I'll show you that in a moment, where you won't actually read the question. You have to wait to listen to it, and then your time will start. Okay, after the narrator actually speaks the question. But in other sections where you have to read it, it does include the time the time it takes to read the questions as well. That's a good question. Good. All right, so types of listening passages. You have a practice task. I always mention this because this is a great opportunity to make sure your microphone, well, at least your headphones are working well, the volume's set well. You won't be able to really check the microphone until the speaking test, but do that practice task to make sure you can hear everything well. That's important. You'll also have conversations to listen to, but also sometimes single speaker. And later on in the more difficult questions, some of those are single speaker. They're speaking for a longer time, maybe 3 minutes. And it's hard, right? You don't know the questions that are coming, and you have to listen to a longer stretch of text, right? All right, so Yijing has asked, do we need to click next for the question instruction? No, you don't need to click next at all in this test. It's there for you to use if you want to move forward, but you wouldn't have to use it to do anything to find out the question instructions or anything like that. You wouldn't need to click next. Next just moves you to the next screen, and whatever that screen is, it could be the next question, it could be the next listening passage, it could be the next section. right? So just know that when you click next, you can't go back. I just prefer don't click it at all. It's not necessary. All right, so here is a task with only text. Okay, so there's no image or anything here. Okay, but it gives you an opportunity to practice listening to this. Notice the blue bar is moving across. This means that something is playing. You should be able to hear it. If you're not hearing anything, there's a problem with your headset. Okay, so make sure you're aware of that. This is listening part 2, a screenshot of that, listening to a daily conversation. Again, you don't see the question, right? You listen to the question. And so you only hear it once. And then you have to be prepared to choose the best answer. So let's do a little practice here. Things to listen for. Who are the speakers? And how do they know each other? What are they talking about? These are things to listen for or think about while you're listening to this. And this is a good opportunity to think about note-taking. Okay, so I'm going to play this. This is an actual passage from a previous test, but I want you to think about these things. Who are the speakers? And, that might, determine how you take notes. Some people create a table for each speaker, and then they write down notes based on what each person is saying. That can be an effective strategy, right? So very important to know who the speakers are, but how do they know each other? What are they talking about? Okay, and maybe there's a problem. Usually there's some reason for the communication, right? So we need to figure out what is the purpose. And sometimes it's a problem. Somebody needs directions or somebody needs advice or help with something. And you want to make sure you understand that. And then also the resolution. How does the problem get resolved? Okay, so we're going to listen to a passage. I want you to try to think of these things. If you have some paper handy, great to practice your note taking as well here. Okay, so if you're ready, let's listen. And remember, on the test, you only listen once and you don't know the questions. So here we go.
This is the last stop. Watch your step on the way out, ma'am.
Thanks, driver. Do you happen to know where the little kids' playground is? I know it's in the park somewhere. Too bad I forgot my smartphone.
There are a few playgrounds here. Do you mean the one next to the water fountain?
No, the one I'm thinking of is just beside the petting zoo. You know, where there's goats and rabbits?
Yeah, I know there's a petting zoo, but I don't know where it is exactly. Anyway, I'm pretty sure there's a children's playground over there past the restaurant. Maybe you could take a look over that way.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Okay, so it's tough, I think, to understand a conversation on one listen, but it's necessary to practice it so you get better at it. And I think note taking is one of the best ways you can practice. It also helps you focus on a lot of things that are important in the question or in the passage. So who are the speakers here? The image helps us a lot in figuring out who the speakers are. And you're usually provided an image at on the first question to help you determine who the speakers are. So in this case, it's a bus driver and probably just someone on the street. Maybe they taken the bus. Maybe they just decided to ask the bus driver for directions, right? How do they know each other? Well, probably not very well. And we get a sense of that by the tone, the way they're speaking to each other. We know that it's not probably two friends speaking or two family members. So important to know that. What are they talking about? So I'm going to ask anyone who wants to comment on this or maybe respond. It's great. Use the questions box. What was the woman looking for? Does anyone want to? So Rowena says yes, direction. So yeah, Rowena says the person was asking for directions. That's important. Percent says playground. Good. Krish Nasharan also says playground. Elena says maybe, Eliana says a park maybe. Gerlivana, playground. And Rowena says little kids playground. Good. Mana, playground. Andy says playground near petting zoo. And Adinesh says playground. Mustafa, playground. It's a good guess. Nuruddin, looking for the petting park. Good. And Raina says little kids playground. And Kalila says playground with the petting zoo. Maybe. A park near the petting zoo, as Bilal said. Crystal said playground. Mohammed said looking for a playground. So very good. Most of you noticed that it's a playground, and specifically a little kid's playground is what she was looking for. I think the petting zoo part of it might distract you, and that's what it's intended to do. They're going to start mentioning other things to kind of distract you from what the real thing she's looking for. And if you listen again, you'll notice that it's very clear she's looking for a little kid's playground. And right, and a lot of people, like Gerlivana says, it's next to the petting zoo. Right, it's not actually the petting zoo or a park or some other thing. So it's very hard to listen to all these details, and that's why note taking is so important, to really focus in on these things and really think about, what is the problem? What is she looking for? So if she's asking directions, it's very important to know probably there's going to be a question about where does she want to go? And then separating that from some of the other information that's provided. All right, so I'm going to play the question, and this is what would happen in the actual test. You would hear the question here. Okay, you can see the question as well, but you don't really have much time to read it. So you have to really focus on listening first. If you have a really quick read, you can prepare yourself maybe, but there's very little time to do that. I would just focus on the listening to the question and making sure you understand it, and then looking at the answers to see which one is probably right. So I'm going to play a sample of the question that you would hear, and then take a guess which of the answers you think is correct. Okay?
Question 2.
What best describes the driver's response?
So the question was simply, what best describes the driver's response? So this is it's only question 2 of 8, so it's pretty early. So Farouk, you're right. Adinesh, also you're right. Rowena, not exactly. You might want to take a second guess, Rowena. Mohammed, correct. Krishna, no. Look at the question options. Crystal, yes. Saba's right. No, sorry, Saba, you might want to take a second guess there. He does kind of do that. So Saba guessed he shows the way. That's a good guess, but the word show is very specific. Show would mean physically showing. And there's no proof of that, right? But it's a good guess. It's probably the closest one. Kalila says is right. Mana is right. Eliana, you might want to guess again. And also Jignesh, guess again. Nuruddin. Hanis is right. Percent right. Zhao, good. Rowena, guess again. All right, thanks a lot. Everyone's great here. So Saba, yes, that's right. Joanne, you may want to guess again. Teddy, guess again. George is right. Abdul is right. Gagandeep is right. Mustafa, yes. Yes, Teddy is right now. Andy's correct. Rowena is correct. All right, so everyone's got it. He makes a guess. This is hard, right? He shows the way would seem to be possible, but when we talk about showing the way, we would say he probably has walked her some of the way, maybe pointed towards where she needs to go. So he's actually almost taking her there, or maybe even taking her there. So he's showing the way. It's more physical. But he makes a guess because he doesn't really get out of the bus that we know of. He doesn't walk anywhere with her. There's no evidence of that. So he makes a guess. So good, Joanne got that as well. Yeah, Balil, you can only listen to the question. You won't be able to read it in these early questions, okay? So that's important to remember. You'll have to listen to the question and you'll only hear it once. So you really want to be focused in on what's being asked of you, okay? Good. Also in part 5 later on, there's also another visual. In this case, it's a video. And the video will have a number of actors in it, usually 3 that I've seen, but it's possible it could be more, but I think 3 is pretty typical. And you want to think about visual clues. Okay, you won't need to, necessarily remember everything about them. It's impossible to remember what everybody's wearing and all of that. But the helpful thing about the video is that you're able to see body language, see their facial expressions as well. And this gives you additional information on how to answer. And these are things that you could take notes about as well as you're listening. Okay, it's a longer listening as well, so you'll have to really focus on note taking for this one, as with other longer ones towards the end of the listening. Okay, so when you are listening to a video and watching a video, think about facial expressions, body language, even their posture, the setting, where are they, and the types of clothing they're wearing. Is it formal or informal? I wouldn't recommend taking notes on what they're wearing specifically in terms of color or mentioning that, 2 of the men are bald. I probably wouldn't take notes on that, but there are some things that could be very helpful, and that's basically body language and facial expressions, how they're feeling about things. So maybe the man in the middle is upset, and you can tell by his body language, he kind of looks a little frustrated maybe, who knows. But this visual information can be very helpful in preparing to answer. Now, in this case, you're actually reading the questions. So you get 5 different questions. So this won't be, spoken. You'll actually be able to read them. So 4, 5, and 6, I believe, are like this, where you'll get multiple questions and you'll able to read them, and then there's these drop-down menus to fill in. Okay. Gurlivana asked, isn't body language kind of subjective? Yes, it is definitely subjective. Although some scientists would disagree and say they've, figured out what body language means, but I would disagree. You don't need to worry about it though, because the questions won't be about the body language. But focusing on body language to some extent can help you answer some of the questions. The most important thing is listening to what they're saying, knowing who's speaking and what they're saying. That's the most important thing. The body language and the visual cues can be helpful additional information. And you'll see some of the questions might talk about how they feel. And that can be determined just from what they say, but the body language can be very helpful as well. All right, so listen for clues in terms of how they speak. Sometimes they have pauses that are purposeful. Maybe they're emphasizing something. The intonation as well is important. Stressed words give additional information just in listening. So definitely be listening for those additional pieces of information that might help you. But what you really want to focus on is the content, of course. So the main topic, key details, facts and opinions. Focusing on that and taking notes will be very helpful. So note taking, again, you need to develop your own strategies for this. There's no perfect way. Some people prefer tables. Some people prefer maybe circles, kind of a mind map approach. I tend to use the mind map because I'm more free to write as I want around something. So I like that, and I can cross something out easily. Some people prefer a table or a list, but you will have to use abbreviations and symbols. You're not going to have enough time to write full words, full sentences. There's no time. So you're going to use point form or abbreviated symbols or words. Again, identify main ideas and the supporting details as best you can as you're listening. Listen for verbal cues and write down only the keywords and phrases. You don't want to get too detailed in your notes. You're focusing on the most important information. Okay. All right. And this is just 3 different types of questions. We don't have time to go into detail on this, but I just wanted to mention that there are 3 different types of questions that you're asked: general meaning, specific information, and inference. And you may want to think about this because it can change how you are, the strategies you're using for listening. So in specific information, it's going to be something that's said specifically in one section. So you might want to, really focus on one word that's going to be said that's going to help you. General meaning questions, again, they're a little, I think, more difficult than specific information, but the information's in the passage. So the information is there. You just need to maybe collect the information from a couple of areas, usually close by. And then inference is probably the most challenging one. Okay. As Balil says, they're a little challenging, right? In listening and reading section. I agree. Inference questions are usually the most challenging for people because the information isn't directly in the passage, and you may have to take a educated guess and draw a conclusion based on the information that's provided, but it doesn't feel as 100% as the others. So here are some listening strategies. These are recommended. I'm not going to go over all of them. Okay, George, okay, understood. Thanks for attending the webinar. Remember, if you do have to leave, you can review this later, okay, by looking at the email you'll get later. There should be some information there, or use the registration link that you originally used, and in about an hour or two, the recording will be available for you to review. So here are just some of the strategies recommended for listening, but I'm going to move on. I'm sure you know a lot of these strategies, okay, but you have to find something that works for you. And this happens during practice, where you start to realize this is maybe the strategy that works for me for this particular question or this particular task, okay? Let's move on to reading. One of the benefits of doing a reading test on the computer is that, at least in the case of the CELPIP, you'll see everything on one screen. The reading and the questions are all available on one screen, including the timer and what you need, everything you need to answer the question. So it'll look something like this. Your reading's always on the left and your questions are on the right. Your timer's up top here. And the scroll bars help you to navigate down to make sure you can read everything, right? Now, instructions are usually provided above each of your tasks, the questions that are being asked, okay? And that's where you are answering the questions within these boxes here. Now, the benefit of reading is you do control your own time. That's good and maybe bad at the same time, because you have to be able to manage your time, okay? Okay, Joanne, take care. Joanne needs to leave too. Hopefully most of you are able to stick around to the end, but again, if you're not, we do have additional recordings available as well. Nuruddin's asked, how many questions are in the reading test? That's a good question. So in part 1 here, we can see there are, I think, about 11 questions. 10 questions. So in total, about, I think, 22, something like this. So yeah, I don't have that screen handy. Maybe Cameron, could you verify that for me? How many questions are in the reading test? I seem to have forgotten. I apologize, but we'll get that answer for you. That's an important one. All right, and of course, notice these drop-down boxes here. Okay, they're the second task in the reading. It depends on what part you're at, but in this particular section, the The second part can confuse a lot of people. The first part is pretty normal because it's questions based on the reading. But the second part is a response, and it's a kind of a gap fill or a close task, if you've ever done those, and you're trying to figure out what would be the most likely response in this case. And this can be a little bit challenging, okay? It's a response to the original reading, and you need to think about a lot of things in order to answer that. So I struggle on that second task down below, and you may want to practice that a little bit more to make sure you're familiar with, you know, how to fill in the blanks in this case. All right. Now, this is just mentioning the scroll bars. The scroll bars are important because, you know, obviously you don't want to miss any of the reading or any of the questions here on the right side. So that scroll bar, really pay attention to that. I think most people don't miss it, but some people might, and that would be unfortunate if you didn't realize there was more information on the screen. Okay. So how should you spend your time during a reading part? Now, what would you do if you were on the test, you're looking at the reading screen? How would you actually spend your time? So you have here 11 minutes. It started to count down. This is your section. What would be the first thing you might want to do? I'm kind of curious to see what you might say. I'm just going to look at some of the questions here as well. Thank you, Cameron, for verifying there are about 38 questions on the reading test. I don't know why that slipped my mind, but we have 2 tests here, and sometimes I get a little bit confused between the 2. But 38 total questions in the reading section. Thank you, Cameron. And Bilal's asked, any good suggestions for filling in the blanks in the reading section? Yeah, I don't have any specific suggestions. I go in order. I generally start, like in this task, I would definitely start answering the questions up top because they will help me fill in the blanks in the second task. And generally, I should mention in the top, the first task there, the questions are generally in order of the reading passage, not perfectly because there are inference questions, but generally they are in order. So I like to start with that and try to complete it as best I can before I move on to the gap fill response section, the task 2 section there. All right, thanks. Some of you have asked some of you have answered what you might do in this task. Gerlivana said, read the questions first. Alex, read the questions. Good. Crystal said, try to answer the questions while reading. So that's a very different approach there. Very good. What's better to do it? Should you read through the questions in detail before you start the reading, or should you brief the questions before you start the reading, or should you start answering as you're reading? It's an important thing to think about. But let's hear, Kalila has said, scan through the context and get a general idea of what it's about. That's what I do, and that's kind of recommended as well. So that's a really good strategy. How much time you spend on scanning or skimming? Skimming is probably the better word to use here, skim, which means to quickly go through something. Scanning is more when you're looking for specific information and you need to really focus in on something. So it takes a little more time. Skimming, just looking through roughly what is this reading about? I think it's a good thing to start and not spend too much time on. Okay, so skimming the passage first. Zhao also said that. Skimming the passage, read the questions, and scan for the answers. Perfect. That's wonderful. And that kind of strategy can be very helpful for the top part here. The second task down below, the strategy needs to change a little bit because it's a different kind of task. So here we're talking about the top. Good. Gerlivana said, read the questions and passage as we go. I think that can work as well. But I do recommend trying to skim the passage to get an idea. I find this to be helpful just to kind of know where information is most likely And as I'm, answering the questions, and then I'm kind of more scanning for the answers after that. So my skimming helped me get an idea of where information is located. Then I really look at the questions, and then I start scanning for the answers. I think it's a good approach. But again, there is no perfect way, and everyone has a slightly different approach. As I'm seeing here, Mustafa is a little bit different, and I'm trying to catch up here. Yeah, Crystal says reading the whole thing would take a lot of time, definitely. Nobody would recommend that. I think reading it deeply, because most of the information won't be in the questions, right? So I think what we're noticing here is that we need to kind of use the time well. We don't need to understand the reading passage thoroughly. We need to understand it well enough to answer the questions and to do the second task. And the second task, again, is a bit challenging, I find, and you want to practice that. It requires you to think a little bit more deeply and maybe make a few inferences as well. So it can be a little bit challenging filling in the blanks there. Good. All right, so review the test screen, skim the passage, read the questions, scan the passage for answers, and answer all the questions. This is recommended, but again, what works for you is what's really important. Okay. And reading skills, remember there are 3 different types of questions. They're hard to identify sometimes, but if you are getting good at that, it can be very helpful. So these 3 different skills can be helpful in understanding maybe what it's looking for, and then the strategies you use to find that, whether you would look, for specific information, scan for it, or kind of skim the passage because it's an inference question and you're looking for specific things that might help you make that inference. Okay. All right. Now, just a sample question here. We'll quickly do this. Actually, in the interest of time, I'm a little bit worried about time here. So, but I'd like to give you a chance to do this. So maybe we'll spend about 30 seconds. I'm going to ask you to, if you were doing this, maybe you've already skimmed the reading a little bit. You got a sense of the reading, what's in each paragraph, and now you've looked at the questions. You're answering question 2. You know roughly they're in the same order of the reading, but you don't know exactly where it is. So I'd like you to just skim through what's there and then try to find the location of question 2. Where is it located? And then maybe take a guess. And we already have some guesses coming in here. So people are so fast. But I'm going to not talk for about 15 seconds because I know it's very hard to read and listen, but some of you are very good at that. But I'm going to stop talking for about 15 seconds. Okay. Okay, so Apurva, you're correct. Krishna Sharon, you're correct. Kalila, you're correct. Alex, very good. You even located exactly where the answer is as well. Rowena, you might want to guess again. Gorlivana, you have the correct location now. Good. Crystal, correct. Jal, maybe you want to guess again. Bilal, correct. Hannes, correct. That's where it's located as well, the information. Saba, Adanesh, excellent. Mustafa, maybe guess one more time. Ranjit, not exact, that's not where the information's located, not in the first paragraph. And Eliana, not in the first paragraph. Abdul, maybe guess one more time. And Farouk and Yao, you got it right now. Good. All right, so where is the information? There it is, in the second paragraph. Right, Crystal, it's located at the beginning of the second paragraph. And here we can see the really important part of this is that he had accepted a job offer in Tokyo. Okay, and he leaves at the end of the month. So because of that, we can assume in a few weeks, maybe that's the end of the month. And then Maria's sons Marco will start a new job. Okay, so the answer is start a new job. Okay, well done. Oh, you even got number one. Jignesh also answered number one. Maria's mother is now, and guessing Victoria. I'm not sure. We don't know the answer choices here, so we're not entirely sure. But well done. This is the kind of practice you want to do. Some people will highlight keywords in the question. I don't know if that's all that helpful than just skimming and then reading the questions and then scanning for the answers. But some people will identify keywords in the question that can help them to locate where the information is most likely located. That can be a strategy to help you as well. Something to think about. All right, so some general strategies here. Skim the main text. These are recommendations from us. 30 to 40 seconds. This is based on what most people are comfortable with and what works for them. But again, this needs to be adjusted to your own needs. But aim for general understanding while you're skimming. Don't get lost in the details of the reading. You don't need to understand the reading in detail. But you do need to have a general understanding of it. Then read the questions and scan. So this is the strategy that was recommended by quite a few. Watch for main ideas and key details to be paraphrased. And that's one of the tricky things. I find a lot of times the answer is a paraphrased version of what's in the text. And so you want to pay attention to that. And it's tough because if you don't know the paraphrase, if you don't know the words or phrases being used, that's challenging. But through process of elimination, you might be able to figure it out. But paraphrasing is used a lot from in the reading and listening. So you want to pay attention and work on your paraphrasing skill as much as you can. Eliminate incorrect answers. Again, process of elimination. Keep moving through the questions. But also always guess even if you're not sure, because you never lose any marks for guessing incorrectly. So always guess. Make sure you answer all the questions, okay? All right. Let's move forward to writing. So now we're moving to communicative tasks. Okay, writing does take a little bit longer, but there's only 2 tasks here, okay? And as I mentioned, there are some basic editing tools. There's a word count and a spell check. And each task, both of them are weighted equally. They're both worth the same. They both have 150, 200 words. So you're expected to write between that, and you really should try to stick within 150 to 200 words. Don't go too far under or too far over. You really want to stick within that word restriction. And the reason is because to be consistent among test takers as well, but also, you know, a good writer should be able to condense their information well and get more information in a smaller amount of words. So this is part of being able to write well as well. Okay, so don't feel the need to continue writing longer. It won't help you too much, and it could hurt you as well. So again, your timer's up top here always. You'll have to control the time here. So there's no specific time for doing certain things within the task. The task is presented, and then you have all of this time to finish. And you want to pay attention to the directions, the background information. This sets up the context on the left, what you're going to be writing about. And then you'll have your instructions on the right above where you're writing, which is here. Down below, that's your writing area and your word count. Okay. All right, so make sure you pay attention to your word count. I think that's really helpful because, you know, you're trying to you know, put the information that's kind of important, but not too much detail, and then you're going too long. So looking at that word count is a helpful way of kind of making sure the information is well balanced. Okay. And so you know roughly how much more words you have to write, and that helps you determine the structure of your response. This response should be an email format, but you don't have to write like the typical things you see on an email, like an email address or anything like that, or the time or the date. None of that. All you need is simply like this. Okay, as you would, you need, if you write an email, you're going to say, you know, hi Bob, or in this case, dear manager. Works. That's all you need to do, and make sure you have a closing as well. So it's like a message in response. You're writing an email message, but you don't need to worry about all that additional stuff that you see with an email. Okay. And in terms of salutations, like how you would address anyone, Bilal's asked this question here, dear manager. I think dear works when you don't really know the person. It could be a person like a manager or a boss or somebody in a position of authority. You want to be a little bit more formal. And then if it's not, maybe the situation's a little bit different and you're writing to someone you know, it might be a little bit more informal. But you have to think of that context, that situation. Okay. Kalila asked, I also thought of this one, to whom it may concern, and that can be used. If you don't know the person, depending on the situation, you might use that expression. It's okay, to whom it may concern. But remember, in this one, it's a little more likely that you know the restaurant, right? And you're addressing it to somebody who works at the restaurant. So maybe to whom it may concern would be too general in this situation. So really think about the situation that you're in, okay? And how informal or formal should it be? Much depends on the context. Somewhere in the middle would be right, okay? And should the response be an email format? No, it doesn't have to be. This is task 2. Task 1 is you're writing an email response. So you have to address somebody, and you can say, like Mustafa is recommending here, sir or madam. I think it's okay. Hi, sir or madam. That works. The raters aren't going to be too worried about how you do that, as long as it seems appropriate enough. And hi, sir or madam works. It's okay. Again, you can make up a name. It's okay. Maybe you want to make up the manager's name. In this case, you could do that. Kalila said, hi there. I think that's a little informal, but it can work in certain contexts. You don't have to be really formal, you know. But I think hi there might be a little informal in this situation, the previous one we were talking about. Remember, also think about the context. What's the purpose of your communication will set the tone. If you're complaining, maybe hi there would be too informal and maybe a little flippant is the word I'm thinking of, if you know that word, but I don't think that works as well. Good. Yeah, I also agree, Gurlavana, that dear works very well. Dear, and then make up a name or something like that. To whom it may concern is similar as well. Nuruddin's mentioned to whom it may concern again. That's when you really don't know who you're talking to. So it really depends on the situation. All right, let's move forward. These are 4 of the categories that raters use. Remember, reading and listening, they're scored by the computer. There's only one right answer, so computer can score that. But with writing and speaking, we use human raters, and at least 4 raters are used for the writing test. Okay, and these are the categories that they actually think about, use when they're rating you. So these are categories that you should be thinking about as well. I do recommend that you use these categories. We have more information on these categories in our webinars and in some of our materials as well that we'll talk about soon. So definitely look into these categories, and we have more specific factors for each of them. Okay, so definitely look into this and try to use these categories to assess your own responses. and think about how you can improve in all of these categories, because they're all important in your rating. All right, I'm not going to go over it in detail right now. These are similar for the speaking as well, except readability becomes listenability, as you'll see. All right, so speaking is how you'll finish the test. Some tasks are text only in speaking. You'll get a prompt and then be expected to just speak. Others are with an image. In fact, I think half of them you'll get an image to have to speak about. I think you start with a couple of text-only questions that are not too difficult. Some people struggle with the beginning of the test because they have to speak about their background experience or their personal opinions, and they have a hard time thinking of it. But they're generally easier, and as you move forward in the speaking test, it gets more difficult towards the end. Okay. So this is just a practice task. You definitely don't want to skip this because it does give you a chance to use your microphone and make sure your microphone is working. So don't skip the practice task. You can actually speak out loud and just get your head moving, your lips moving, so you're able to answer the questions that are coming. This one's not scored, so you can just practice with it, and when you're ready, you can move forward. And then your real test will start. Okay. Remember that some of the questions are text only, like this. You'll only get a question and you'll have to respond. You'll get your preparation time though. The good thing about the speaking is, well, maybe the good and bad thing is you're not in control of the time. The time is controlled for you. Okay. So you're not able to control any of the time. You got to work with the time that you're given. Kalila asks, how will I know if my mic works? That's a really good question. This is how you'll know. I'll get there in one moment. That's a really good question. If your microphone icon is not moving up and down like this, as you can see, as you speak, then it's not working. If it's not moving at least to the middle, then there's a problem, maybe. You're not loud enough, or you're not speaking loud enough, or the microphone's too far away from your mouth, or there's another problem with the microphone. If it's not bouncing up like this, then there's a problem. And in the test center, you want to put your hand up during the practice task to make sure. Also, I should mention the blue bar. Okay, when it's moving across like that, that means you're actually being recorded. And the time that you have, as we did have a question here from Apurva, that how long do you need to speak? Well, you can see your time up at the top right, beside the next button. That recording time is how much time you need to speak, always. So when you see that recording time, you'll know how much time you need to speak. Okay? All right, and I've already mentioned that the microphone does this. If it's not doing that, there's a problem. All right, and also note that your preparation time, this is a longer one, speaking task 2. You get 30 seconds to prepare, which is not a lot of time. To read that includes reading the question and preparing. So you want to really, do your best to use the time wisely. You'll probably spend a good amount of that time understanding the question, and you won't have a lot of time to take any notes, but maybe just 10 or 15 seconds to write down quickly, maybe 3 bullet points of what you're going to say. That could be helpful. Okay, but in task 2 here, talking about a personal experience, you have to be prepared. Again, it doesn't have to be true. You can make it up. Often that's what I do. My memories are really old now, so I don't have a lot of university memories and stuff like this that I can draw on. But I'll make it up. I'll just make it up most of the time, or I'll pick something that maybe is partly true, and I'll change it a little bit so that I have more interesting things to say. Okay. Again, you get visuals, like this is task 3. I kind of like the visuals because it helps you to focus on something that you need to describe. And in this case, you're basically describing a scene. I'm not going to go into detail of what you would do there. Definitely come to our webinars, our speaking webinar, to get into more detail about these tasks. Our speaking webinar, we actually go through all 8 tasks on the speaking test. So it's a very useful webinar to attend. But here you would obviously, really use descriptive language. You start with an overview of the scene. You want to explain this to someone else who can't see it. And that's another thing to remember on the test is you're often asked to explain things to someone else, and you have to make sure you're talking to someone else who can't see the picture in this case. This is a task 5, which uses visuals as well. It's a complicated task because there's 2 parts to it, and that's a little bit challenging as well. Okay. All right, we're done. I know I went a little fast through the speaking. I apologize for that. It's just that in the interest of time, I have to get to test preparation materials though. So at least 3 raters assess each test taker's speaking test. That means at least 3. For writing, it's at least 4. And sometimes there's additional raters that are called in to settle any disagreements amongst raters. So we try to make sure that we always have multiple raters assessing the speaking test to make sure that they're in agreement. If there's a disagreement amongst 3 raters, then a 4th rater and maybe even a 5th rater would become involved in order to make sure there's more agreement. Okay. Will you be able to see the question while answering the question? Rowena wants to know, in speaking, yes, you will. Definitely always see the question while you're answering in speaking. It's very important to be able to see it, yeah. And Alex, I think we've answered that one, good. And okay, I'm just gonna move forward now. So these were the categories, again, similar to similar to writing, except for listenability here. For writing, it was readability, and for listening, for speaking, it's listenability. But these are the categories, and again, there's more information on this in our materials, and look into it further. We actually provide all the factors involved here in each of these categories, okay? And let's talk about the test preparation materials. So again, I do recommend our CELPIP Speaking Pro, and not included here is the CELPIP Writing Pro, which just came out. We need to update this slide, I think. We also have Writing Pro, and we do this in every month. We do it again. We go through the rotation again. The Writing Pro and the Speaking Pro there's actually 2 different ones. One are focused on level 5, and the other is focused on level 9. So you have a choice depending on what your goal is to go to a level 5, target 5, or a target 9. Or you can go to both because you can benefit from both, and they're not exactly the same. So you may want to attend both. But look into the website, celpip.ca, to see when the next webinars are being offered. Also, I do recommend the CELPIP sample test and the practice test. The sample test you can get at any time just by going to our website. However, the practice test, you need to sign up for an account, but it is free. Once you sign up for the account, very simple process, you'll get a practice test put into your account for free. And then any other purchases you make are put directly into your account so you can access them, okay? And on our website as well, we do have the CELPIP study tips. So you want to look into that as well. Now, in terms of purchasing, we do have 7 practice tests available for purchase. They're generally, the LS are $25 each, and the general is $35, and the LS is, the general LS is $25, okay? And yes, they are full-length tests that are provided when you purchase, and you get 2 complete tests with each purchase. So when you're purchasing a practice test, you're actually getting 2 tests, not 1. But 1 test includes a a lot of additional information like speaking and writing responses at multiple levels. They have samples provided, which is helpful. Okay, and then you get an additional test to practice with after when each purchase. And you do get a discount. I think if you purchase multiple ones, you'll get a discount. And you get instant results for listening and reading, and the writing and speaking performance standards are provided. Okay. I do recommend this program if you have time, CELPIP Accelerate. If you have at least a month or two or maybe 3 to really spend some time studying and preparing, the CELPIP Accelerate, I think, is one of the best values of all of our products because of the amount of information that you get. Okay, and again, it's self-directed. There are a lot of instructional videos in there. You get a complete practice test as well. And you get analysis of sample responses and downloadables and things to work on. I think it's just so much information that you'll be totally immersed in preparing. And I think it's valuable. It's helpful. As I've gone through it a couple of times, I continue to learn new things by going through that program. So, however, we also have CELPIP Practice and Analysis. And this is a self-directed learning program as well. It's similar in some ways to Accelerate, but different because it provides a kind of a different perspective and a lot more focus on practice as well. So you might want to look into that one, CELPIP Practice and Analysis. We also have a number of books. Most of them are ebooks, so you can get them electronically. Some of them are only in print, and I'll just show you a couple here. Reading Your Way into English. This is available in print only, I think. No, it's available in ebook. Good. And a lot of the books we're not providing in print in the future. We're going to switch to ebook, but some of them we want to continue in print. And this one actually is only available in print, and it's an excellent series of books that focus on reading and writing and listening and speaking. Some people prefer to work with paper, and they like to fill out things on paper as well. I'm kind of like that. So, and then we have also some study guides that you might find helpful. So all of this is available on our website. If you go to celpip.ca, you'll see test prep materials, and you'll actually, it's divided now by free and paid materials, so that helps you kind of figure out. All right. And I will mention briefly the CALE. The CALE is an academic English language test, so you may want to look into that if you're interested in maybe going to a Canadian university in the future. Or sometimes it's used for some professional organizations like Immigration Consultants of Canada. But certainly look into the CALE. We have another website called cale.ca. Okay, and if you are interested in it, you can even take a pre-test, and this is a free opportunity to take the test in a test center, and it's free. And if you do that, then you get $50 off your CALE test if you register for a CALE test, or you'd get $50 off your CELPIP test. So it's kind of a great way to maybe try out the CALE if it's something you think you might do in the future, and get a $50 discount on your CELPIP even. You don't need to have registered for any test to be able to do the pre-test. You just have to find a test center that offers it, and you can find them on our website as well. Look for your local test center, see if they're offering the pre-test. You have to go to cale.ca though, not celpip.ca. All right, and here's some contact information. There's a number of ways for you to get in touch with us. Obviously through our website. Sometimes there's a automatic way to get in touch with us through the website. On the bottom right side, you'll see a chat option pop up sometimes, and that means someone's available immediately and they can answer a question for you. So that's great. You'll see that usually only Monday to Friday during office hours. Okay, but you can contact us through email, phone, and social media as well is a great way to keep up with what we're doing. I find YouTube, the CELPIP official channel, to be very helpful. There's a number of videos there that have been pre-recorded and can be very helpful to you. So I definitely recommend going to YouTube and seeing what's there for you. All right, thank you so much, everyone. There was another question here I should have answered. Let's see. If you do have any questions, feel free to stick around. But if you do have to go, I do thank you for attending the webinar. Thank you, Rowena, for your comment. I appreciate it. And Mohammed Javad, I hope I said that right. I love that name. I really appreciate your comment as well. And I wish you all the best on your tests, especially those coming up. Some of you are tomorrow, and some of you are very soon. So I hope you get a great, easy test. I always say that. Get all the easy questions and do really, really well, okay? There was one question here I wanted to address. I think Alex asked, what is the correlation between the number of correct answers in listening and reading in the bands? That information, I think, is on the website. So I recommend going to celpip.ca and looking for that information. And if you can't find it, contact customer service, and I'm sure they'll be able to give you some information on that. Unfortunately, we don't have that information right now. I haven't memorized it yet, but I know it's available on the website. So check that out, okay? And thank you, everyone, for your nice comments. I really appreciate. Prasant as well. Sujia, thank you. Eliana says, when will we have the CELPIP test in South America? Oh, yes, I know they're working on that, and that needs to happen soon. So I do hope that's going to happen soon. Definitely, you might want to ask customer service, maybe, or keep up to date on our website as well. Yi Zhang, thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Mohammed Javad. I appreciate that. I usually do get them wrong, but in your case, I got it right, so I'm proud of myself. Rajan, thank you very much. Jason said, what tips in a nutshell do you have to score 12? In a nutshell, I would say lots of practice. Even for me, I can't easily get a level 12. I really need to practice. Getting used to the questions. Obviously, we need to improve our language proficiency as well, but it's not as impossible as you may think. But if you do need a 12, it will take some practice for sure. Thank you, Gorli Vanya. I appreciate it very much. And Melissa, I hope you do well tomorrow. Definitely, I agree. And Saba, thanks. Rowena, thank you so much. And Angie as well. I really appreciate that. Jignesh, great. Thanks so much. And Crystal and Hannes and Jason, you guys are all awesome. Thanks so much for your great engagement today. Thank you, Cameron, for answering a lot of questions for me today. That helped me get through the session. Thanks so much. All right, I'm going to end the session, and we went a little bit long. I apologize, but thanks again, Yao, Farouk, Zhao. I think it's Zhao, right? Zhao Paulo? I hope I said that right. I keep practicing these. Yay, good, Zhao. Okay, good, I got it right. All right, take care, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Take care, Bilal. All right, bye-bye, everyone.